It all started with a story, told in a dilapidated church by a turtle. A story we've all heard over and over again. But it wasn't the story that confounded me. Instead, it was a small detail in the Church of Vows that piqued my interest and sent me down a rabbit hole. At first, I wasn't even exactly sure what I was looking for, but what I found left me questioning everything. Pastor Muriel eagerly tells us the origin of the Church of Vows, the place in which he still presides over to this day. It is here at the Church of Vows that the great houses of the Erdtree and the Moon were joined. This joining, as we know, was the marriage of the red-haired champion Radagon and the champion of the full moon, Lady Renala. He goes on to say, our church holds in view the monuments of both houses, the Erdtree of the capital and the Academy of Raya Lucaria. There in the windows, the great Academy of Raya Lucaria is visible, and in front of it is a small moon-gazing pool that mirrors the one found in the Carian Manor. At the entrance, the golden Erdtree towers and looms over all whom set foot into the church. But what sparked my curiosity were the statues found inside. Statues and other iconography are used in Elden Ring as markers, and oftentimes can show us where an area's allegiance lies. For example, the young maiden statue is heavily used by both the Carians and Raya Lucaria, and it acts as a sort of representation for both of them. The same applies to the statues of Queen Marika. But we don't get a statue of the young maiden or of Queen Marika in the Church of Vows, even though those both would accurately represent the house of the Erdtree and Raya Lucaria. No, instead, we get something different. First is the solitary statue of a Nox Swordstress. These same statues are littered around the eternal cities of Nokron and Noxstella. We even can encounter these women firsthand in the game. The Nox Swordstress were the personal guards of the Night Maidens, the highest-ranking clerics among the Nox. But the Nox invoked the ire of the Greater Will and were banished underground. So why do we find this statue at the Church of Vows? There are actually multiple connections between the Carians, Raya Lucaria, the Nox, and the original sorcerers, known as astrologers. The treasured sword of the Carian Manor is the Sword of Night and Flame, which describes the astrologers who preceded them. We are also told that the Glintstone sorcerers are the descendants of astrologers, a fact that the Carians remain aware of. But the Nox were not Glintstone sorcerers. Instead, they used night sorceries. This is the type of sorcery favored by those in the town of Celia, a city found in the heart of Caelid. Below Celia, the eternal city of Nokron sleeps. This sorcery originates from the maiden of that place. Master Lusat is actually a prime example of a founding Glintstone sorcerer who actually came from the town of Celia. He would later be expelled from the academy, though. If we look at the sigils for both the Carian and the night sorceries, we can see that they share a lot of similarities to one another. The Nox, like the Carians, followed the moon, and, like the academy, the night sky. The moon of Noxstella is called the Lost Black Moon, and is said to have been the guide for countless stars. And at the top of the talisman, we can see what appears to be two birds facing each other, not unlike the sigil of the Cuckoo and the Academy. Remember, it wasn't until after Radagon abandoned Renala that the Academy turned against her and the Carians. The moon and the stars would one day go their separate ways, thus fracturing the night sky. And the main function of the moon-gazing pool in the Church of Vows is for atonement, which requires celestial dew, a hidden tear found in the Eternal City, also known as a night tear. further connecting the Carians to the Nox. So even though they've slowly become disjointed over time, I believe these groups are all interconnected by a common ancestor, the astrologers, who lived high upon the mountain peaks next to their neighbors, the fire giants. This could explain why a statue of a Nox swordstress is found in the Church of Vows along with the moon-gazing pool. This is the monument to Renala's house. So what about Radagon and the House of the Erdtree? Standing in a semicircle on either side of the Nox swordstress are 6 cloaked figures, each with a single lit torch in hand. As friend of the channel Jack is a Mimic said, these statues are everywhere, from Noxtella to your mama's house. And he's not wrong. These statues are found in some unexpected areas, holding a sword or a book, or sometimes nothing at all. It's one of the very first images we're introduced to in the game, at the precipice of anticipation. The same figure is seen all throughout the Divine Towers, along bridges in Limgrave and Altus Plateau. They're even found at the entrance and the exit of the capital city of Leyndell. We can see here a misbegotten even praying to one. These also happen to be the same statues found scattered throughout the lands between, that contain smithing stones inside of them, and require a large enemy to crack open. I also found them inside of the walking mausoleums and even in the eternal city of Noxtella. The statues in the Church of Vows are identical to the others in every way save for one: their fire-burning torches. So why this statue? Instead of using a much more recognizable image like a statue of Marika or images of the Erdtree itself, why this statue to represent Radagon and the House of the Erdtree? And on top of that, holding something seen as blasphemous to those who worship the Erdtree: fire. If this were any other game, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. But this is Elden Ring, a game that has put secrets in statues before. So I went looking for an answer. And here's what I found. A quick editor's note I wanted to add in is that I didn't include this statue that stands behind Pastor Muriel in the original script. It's a cloaked feminine figure holding their hand out. I did search for it throughout the game, and the closest one that I could find to it is this one here, though the hand placement isn't exactly the same. I think that this could represent Queen Marika, and because it's seen standing behind Pastor Muriel, this could be a clue to the fact that Marika was always behind the marriage of Radagon and Queen Renala since the beginning. These statues do not represent Queen Marika or even the Erdtree. Instead, I believe these statues have 2 variations that represent 2 very specific things, starting with the one holding the sword, which represents the champion. All throughout the history of the lands between, there have always been mentions of champions. Renala and Radagon themselves were even champions, and met on the battlefield. So then why are these statues found in Noxtella? They actually stand before the elevator that leads us down to the Lake of Rot, and we know that the god of Rot is sealed here. The Blue Dancer charm tells us that a blind swordsman sealed away an ancient god, a god that was Rot itself. So perhaps this blind swordsman was the champion that these statues represent. And remember, the Nox were not always outcasts. You can find rune 10s in the underground region that say, "The grace of gold blessed those who were first to serve it with vivid coloration." I believe the Nox were amongst the first to serve the Greater Will. This is why they were punished for treason. The Fingerslayer blade is the treasure of Nokron and is proof of the high treason committed by the Eternal City. Treason is betraying one's country or sovereign. But what about the variation of the statue with a book? I believe these are scholars. Radagon, after marrying Rennala, studied sorceries, and with Queen Marika, he studied incantations. Radagon wanted to be whole and seemed under the impression that scholarship would complete him. The Golden Order seal tells us fundamentalism is scholarship in all but name, and Radagon was a Golden Order fundamentalist. The seal is found at the minor Erdtree in Altus Plateau, where Melina tells us Queen Marika's words, "I declare mine intent, to search the depths of the Golden Order. Through understanding of the proper way, our grace is increased." So Queen Marika and Radagon both sought out intellectualism. This explains why we see this version of the statue alongside the Carian Study Hall, a place of study and learning. Both variations are found at the Divine Towers, and if you look closely, you can see the swordsman along the top of the entryway and the scholar just below it. This could imply that to achieve divinity, one must possess both the skill of the champion and the intelligence of the scholar. Sword and pen, but that's just a theory of mine. The Church of Vows version of this statue does not hold a sword to represent champions, nor a book to represent scholars. Instead, they hold fire. All fire spells disaster for those who worship the Erdtree, but it is the flame of ruin in particular that is described as anathema to it, something rejected and outright banned. Nevertheless, the flame of ruin has ties to the Erdtree that run deep, and may actually shine a light upon why these statues are holding fire instead of a sword. Fire in all forms was strictly prohibited to all of those who worship the Erdtree, in iconography and in practical use. The perfumers, for example, used fire in their aromatics during the Shattering War, despite it being forbidden. There were, however, prophets who saw fire within the faith, and because of this, were banished and driven away from their homes. The shackles around the neck warned passerby not to lend an ear to their sermons. Not only were they punished, but they were also marked so as to discourage others from listening to their prophecy. So what exactly did they see? Fire's deadly sin is an incantation originating from a deeply ominous prophecy. The prophet despaired, looking up at the Erdtree, for soon the kindling would burst into flame, bringing ruin. They saw the kindling maiden sacrificed and the flame of ruin burning the Erdtree. This is also mentioned in the Candletree wooden shield, thought to represent a surreptitious prophecy of cardinal sin. The lit Candletree design was forbidden. This design, as others have already pointed out, is one seen in the DLC trailer. This connects the prophecy of the Erdtree burning to the land of shadow, which appears to predate the age of the Erdtree itself. The Candletree design is also a prominent image in Miquella's Haligtree. The rotten staff is dropped by an avatar protecting the tree. It's a ceremonial staff that depicts the Erdtree in historic radiance. So why hide this prophecy? The burning of the Erdtree is the first cardinal sin. The image and even the thought of it is strictly forbidden. But when we agree to let Melina set the Erdtree ablaze using the flame of ruin, what happens? The flame engulfs the Erdtree, turning the sky a brilliant red, but the Erdtree doesn't fall. Behold, the Erdtree yet stands, tall and unwavering, mindless of the scorch of the flame of ruin. How can this be? There has long been a theory floating around the community that the Erdtree has been burned before, and I personally am among those who agree with this. To me, I imagine the Erdtree to be like a phoenix. It perishes in an all-consuming flame, but is then birthed anew from its own ashes. Enya tells us only the smoldering flame in the great forge of the giants on the highest peak in the lands between can burn the Erdtree. But that isn't exactly true. There is another flame, one born of hate and sorrow, that can also set the Erdtree ablaze, the frenzied flame. And in that ending, we see the Erdtree truly destroyed, melted down rather than just merely burned. So where did this lie come from? And how do we unfold it to reveal the truth? If you are liking this video so far, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and to ring the bell so you get updated whenever I post new videos. Before the Erdtree, there was the primordial crucible. There are remnants of the crucible still throughout the lands between, with the Crucible Knights being a primary one. Crucible Knights use 4 different aspects of the crucible, which are described as ancient Erdtree incantations. The Crucible Axe armor says that it holds the power of the Crucible of Life, the primordial form of the Erdtree. Primordial means to exist at the beginning or the earliest stages. We can infer this to mean that the Erdtree came from the Crucible. One of the honored Crucible Knights, Ordovis, had a greatsword imbued with an ancient holy essence, and its red tint exemplified the nature of primordial gold. So before the golden Erdtree, there was red mixed in, which many before me have translated to mean copper or bronze, like the color of the Crucible Knight's armor, and even some of the imagery we see in the capital city. But the Crucible Knights served Godfrey, first Elden Lord, and after he and his warriors were driven from the lands between, many of them scattered across the realm. And eventually, they too were rejected by those who worshipped the Erdtree. In time, the strength and appearance of these knights was seen as chaotic and deserving of scorn. I'm reminded of something from my Grace is Alive video, the coloration of runes, or the grace of the Erdtree. As the quantity of runes grows higher, the image actually grows darker in color. Instead of a bright, shining golden iris, we see deep coppered colored ones, like those in the Newman's rune, the Hero's runes, and even the Lord's rune. This could be interpreted to mean that the higher the quantity of grace, the less golden it becomes, and the more it takes on the original coloration of the primordial crucible. So what was this red tint that exemplified the nature of primordial gold? In my eyes, there are 2 options, fire or blood. And considering the influence of George R.R. Martin, I believe it is both fire and blood. Let's explore what this red tint was, starting with the flame of the primordial crucible, the flame before the Erdtree. There is evidence of a flame once being a part of the Erdtree's history and the 2 fingers in many different places, if you only know where to look. Or if you're like me and obsessively scour through your inventory 100 times over. The simplest of items is what first clued me in on this. The Warming Stone is a rune fragment blessed by an incantation of the 2 fingers. It's said that the Erdtree was once as warm as the gentle sun. That warmth must come from some kind of source, the most obvious being fire. And the only other stone like it is the Frenzied Flame Stone. To craft a Warming Stone, one must combine a Sanctuary Stone, an Erdleaf flower, and a Smoldering Butterfly. An eternally smoldering butterfly that serves as kindling for a number of items. This is very clearly a callback to the fire giants, with the eternally smoldering flame of ruin and the kindling maiden required to ignite it. It also appears in a topic I've discussed quite a bit on my channel, the guilty, those who are strung up across the lands between for their crimes. Their skin is dark as if charred by flame, and they appear to be smoldering from within their very bodies. The divine towers themselves also tie into this. Each divine tower features a pillar with a fire lit atop it at the entrance level. These pillars resemble those lit in Siofra River. The elevator also depicts an empty star that closely resembles the symbol on the Crucible Knight's breastplate. And at the very top are 8 pillars, with a symbol that we've all seen before, in the eye of the fell god. The stone centered in these pillars resembles the remains of meteor showers and the boss rooms of each tunnel, which I believe are one and the same. These could be fragments of meteorites. In our world, meteorites burn as they enter our atmosphere, so in theory, these fragments could still contain within them the warmth that they carried when they crash-landed into the lands between. There is also evidence in smithing stones. Level 6 is a rare specimen that's tinged with gold and was used by the royal forces. But level 7 is a glossy greenish-black stone found in the polar region, or the mountaintops of the giants, and it's semi-vitrified. These smithing stones were used by the champions of the war against the giants at the birth of the Erdtree. To vitrify something is to convert it into glass, or a glass-like substance, by exposure to heat. And as we know, it was Godfrey and his men who were commanded by Queen Marika to put the giants to the sword in order to usher in the new epoch, the age of the Erdtree, or birth as this description calls it. So the champions of the Erdtree used fire-treated smithing stones against the fire giants in battle. These same champions were also armed with an incantation, Flame Protect Me, which is the most ancient of the fire monks' incantations. It creates a fire within that increases fire damage negation. It is said that this incantation was used during the war against the giants long ago, during which it protected the champions of the Erdtree. And the image of this fire monk's incantation is much lighter than the others like it, appearing almost golden. The fire monks were amongst those who fought against the giants in the war, and were later tasked with watching over and guarding the flame of ruin. These monks and prelates were privy to many of the secrets of the fire giants, including those inside the giants' prayer book, and they kept these secrets well hidden from all others. Some of the fire monks feared the flame of ruin. One of their incantations leaves the caster with subtle burns, as a reminder that they must fear the flame. And we even find the ashes of a traitor who fled his post, Ammon. Ammon swore fealty to the god-slaying black flame, and so became the first fire monk to turn traitor. Or perhaps it is better said that he fled from the giant's flame out of cowardice. But over time, the monks would go from fearing the flame to revering it. We can see prelates, fire monks, and thorn sorcerers gathered outside the Guardian's garrison, some kneeling to the forge of the fire giant. The fire monk's ashes say, though charged with keeping watch over the flame, after many years of solemn duty, he had succumbed to its allure. I would even go as far to say that eventually, they all but forgot their ties to the Erdtree, and instead began to place their faith within the flame of ruin. While their incantations do have a separate category, the sigil that appears when they cast is that of the fire giants, and the fire prelate's helm is fashioned like a cauldron, furnished with embers in it that would surge into flames when the wearer's faith reaches its highest point. And when their flame was stolen, the monks traveled all the way to Liurnia in pursuit of the fugitive who stole it. This fugitive, Adon, drops the flame of the fell god, a legendary incantation that reveals the giant's biggest secret of all. The fell god still lurks within the fire giants. Among the guardians of the flame is their chief, who wields a tricksome shield depicting a malformed, one-eyed god who was once worshipped by the giants. This evil deity is believed to have been slain by Queen Marika. But this is yet another lie, for the fell god still lives, inside the very body of the last fire giant. In an intense cutscene for the fire giant's second phase, we watch in horror as it sacrifices its own leg to the fire, awakening the fell god's face within its torso. This fire and strength isn't inherently that of the giants. Instead, it is a borrowed power, and yet they were still defeated. The fire giants were all, save one, impaled, their bodies left out on display in the freezing, biting winds of the mountaintops. So was the flame of the crucible the same as the flame of ruin? To be honest, I don't really know. I almost didn't make this video because of that very question. On the one hand, there are many similarities, but on the other, it doesn't quite make sense for the champions of the Erdtree to have wielded the Flame of Ruin against the fire giants, who also wielded the Flame of Ruin. I was stumped, and this script sat for almost 6 months in my drafts, until the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC trailers dropped. Those stripped of the grace of gold shall all meet death in the embrace of Messmer's flame. Is it possible that the flame of Messmer was the flame removed at the birth of the Erdtree? We don't know much about Messmer yet, but I believe it's possible. There was a lot of flame imagery shown in both the gameplay trailer and the most recent story trailer, including the burning wicker men, and during what I'm assuming is the War Unseen, where the land was purged in battle and set ablaze by Messmer's flame. A design aspect I want to go over again is that of the lit candle tree design. The top of it is obviously supposed to represent the burning of the Erdtree, but if you look down at the roots, it actually kind of looks like a hand with 5 fingers. And if we take a look at the fire giants, the very top of whatever they were impaled with has the exact same design. This further connects the Land of Shadow with not only the burning of the Erdtree, but also the war against the giants. Now, a really important point I want to make clear is that I don't want to count out the possibility that Messmer's flame is a type of flame we've already encountered in the game. I kind of love the idea that all of these different flames originate from a first fire, an original flame from which all life and all destruction came from. Hayeta tells us that all there is came from the one great. Then came fractures. I've theorized previously that Messmer's flame could be a sort of holy flame, similar to the holy flame of the Rune of Death, found on the Black Knife and Malakath's Black Blade, which both deal holy damage. Ardovis's Great Sword also deals holy damage, tying back in the Crucible, the origin of the Erdtree. And the incantation Black Blade is also an Erdtree incantation. But I do think it would be very interesting if his flame were unique in some way. So who knows? But I do personally think that this is the flame that was once a part of the Crucible and was used by the champions of the Erdtree against the fire giants, delivering them death. This is why the statues in the Church of Vows hold a lit torch, to represent the fire that was once a part of the House of the Erdtree, a representation of what Radagon and the capital city came from, the ancient champions of the Erdtree who wielded fire against the giants, a fire that predates the birth of the Erdtree itself. So if Messmer's flame is the flame before the Erdtree, then where does the blood part come from? In that forsaken place, blood must spill, the blood of your fellows, the Erdtree faithful. The new story trailer opens on a scene of gore and massacre. As many people have already pointed out, The piles of bloodied corpses are stacked in a way that resembles the trunk of the Erdtree, which could signify the need for blood at the birth of the Erdtree. I've talked about Mikola feeding the Haligtree his blood for almost 2 years now, and I know it rubs some people the wrong way, but I believe this to be an extremely important aspect of not only Mikola's journey, but also to how the Erdtree came to be. I saw a comment recently that said, what if Mikola knew that blood was needed to grow a great tree, but drastically underestimated how much? I think it might go even a step further. I've long wondered how the Erdtree came to be, and have even theorized in the past that Mikola may have discovered its origin and a way to create his own. He may have thought that feeding himself, blood, flesh, and all, to the Haligtree would create a new Erdtree. His Empyrean blood carried with it his strength, his divinity, and his purity. It's possible that this would have worked, that it was working. We see an imprint of Mikola in the roots where Malenia sits, and the Haligtree roots seem to be staving off Malenia's accursed rot. The Haligtree itself even began to produce amber, as we see in the Mikolan Night Sword. Instead of glintstone, amber from the Haligtree is embedded in the blade. And remember the rotten staff? It came from an Erdtree avatar, who emerged in the wake of the Elden Ring's shattering, determined to protect the Erdtree's children. Could that mean that the Haligtree had become a minor Erdtree, just like Mikola had planned for? But was his blood enough? We may never know. Mikola's cocoon was taken from the Haligtree and is now surrounded by a lake of blood. So much blood that the rock walls are dripping with it. The Lord of Blood's exaltation says, "Render up your offerings of blood to your Lord. Drench my consort's chamber. Slake his cocoon's thirst." His cocoon is also planted on top of a giant pelvis, which makes it appear like a womb. And birth, as we all know, is bloody. But the Formless Mother and Moog are not the only ones connected to blood. There is also the Blood Star, which is connected by the Thorn Sorcerers. The guilty, their eyes gouged by thorns, lived in eternal darkness. There, they discovered the Blood Star. They turned their own blood sacrifices into red thorns of punishment by using the staff of the guilty, which are staffs fashioned from a smoldering withered sapling, smoldering like the flame and withered like Mikola's arm. The fire prelates are also connected to the thorn sorcerers through their use of the thorn whip. So the thorn sorcerers are allied with the fire monks and the prelates, fire and blood. The main trait of the thorn sorcerers is their blindness, but they aren't just simply blind. Their eyes are gouged out. Those of you who've seen my Grace is Alive video probably know where I'm going with this. Queen Marika and Radagon are both missing their eyes, and I believe the scar and sore seals are theirs, which would mean that their eyes have been gouged out. It's only after their eyes have been removed that the Thorn Sorcerers discover the Blood Star, there in eternal darkness. Or shadow, perhaps? Remember, Mikola used his own blood to grow the Haligtree, not by a wound inflicted by another, but one that he inflicted upon himself. A sacrifice. Does the Blood Star play a part in this? I don't know, but I can't wait to find out. This all started with a simple story in a church, then a statue, and now onward toward DLC content. I really do hope we get some more information about Messmer's flame, his connection to the birth of the Erdtree, and Queen Marika, and perhaps even a few answers, though that might be asking for too much. Thank you if you made it to the end. There's a lot in this video to dissect, so please let me know any of your thoughts on it. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, and if you'd like to support my channel, you can subscribe, donate, or even just share this video. My next video will be a showcase of all of my favorites of your theories. So if you haven't commented a theory on my community post, you can do so here. Make sure that this is something you're comfortable sharing and with me potentially expanding upon in my upcoming video. As always, I can't wait to talk to you all in the next one. Bye!